so here they are. Oh, bloody hell, Trump, what do you need? A bucko, I am here to serve. Serve I will. You know, gross. Just guzzling Trump's piss. So that happened over the weekend. How true is it all? Well,
we are heading into another critical week for Canadian politics. Premiers are set to meet with the Prime Minister to discuss a response to tariff threats from U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. The government says all options are on the table, as one Premier already had her own meeting at Mar-a-Lago this weekend. Danielle Smith ensuring energy exports are front and center in the ongoing talks. CTV's Jeremy Sharon starts us off.
It could be one of Canada's most important bargaining chips, but is the government willing to use it?
What I can tell you is everything is on the table.
Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly had that to say when asked if the government is prepared to cut off energy exports south of the border, a step the minister wouldn't rule out in the face of Trump's 25% tariff threat.
For those who are watching us right now, it is important to understand that the threat is real and we're acting on it. And that's why I'm calling every political leader in this country to be on board, because this is not time for division.
CTV News has confirmed Canadian officials are narrowing a list of American.
I was doing the best economically in my life. Oh, well. Hey, did you invest in Hawk Tua? Did you get it on the ground floor? Are you just reaping the benefits of the Hawk Tua coin?
Products that could be targeted with retaliatory tariffs. And Joly says diplomatic efforts with U.S. counterparts are ongoing, but this trade expert says Canada needs a measured response.
Subtle. You can't threaten, but you can certainly point out things that are obvious that might get overlooked in the rush to policy in the U.S.
By the way, when it comes to Canada and Greenland being taken over by the good old Trump administration, because, you know, the people who told you for a very long time that they were anti-war seem to have, as Jesse Waters put it, colonial thirst, and they are looking for the blood. I want to show you something that's kind of scary. Right-wing media is actually really promoting right now the idea that Greenland wants to either sell itself or be liberated by you Americans, and before you send your sons and daughters to die on the shores of Greenland in order to liberate it from Denmark, please just know a couple things. The New York Post posted this: Greenland leaders ready to talk with Trump after President-elect expressed interest to make territory part of America. Tim Pool says, based. And then this headline from the Leading Report, another right-wing rag. Greenland's leader, Mut Eged, said that he's prepared to negotiate with Trump about the future of the Arctic territory. This is all false. All of this is false. They are just making these headlines being like, oh, he says he's ready to negotiate and possibly sell off Greenland to America. None of that is true. If you both look at the clip that they refused to watch, because you could have just watched the clip. I don't know if they didn't want to read, but I wanted to highlight just one frame. We don't want to be Americans right here. And, you know, they said pretty clearly, Greenland's leader says his people don't want to be Americans. If you watch the clip, that he's very, very direct about that. He doesn't say, well, I mean, if the price is right, or, well, you know, and no one's going to really be able to resist the American empire showing up on our shores, so we'll see. Or, hey, we would really like to see a big paycheck, and maybe we'll talk about that. No, it's just, we don't want to be Americans. They want autonomy. They want to be an autonomous nation separate from Denmark. That's what they're saying at this moment in time. And the rest of the world should probably respect that.
In an interview with MSNBC that aired in full today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada is ready to respond.
As we did last time, we are ready to respond with tariffs as necessary.
Alberta is taking their own diplomatic approach too.
I gotta say, all of this is, again, really fucked up and pathetic. It's a weird time because, like, I thought this would be a moment where you would see a whole bunch of, like, hyper nationalism here in Canada. You would see a lot of people being like, you know, fuck Trump, how dare he, we are proud Canadians. And instead, it's been a ton of like, he needs to realize what an important trading partner we are. He needs to realize how valuable we are, and he will if we just keep going to Mar-a-Lago. And this is a great example of that. Jordan Peterson, Danielle Smith, and Kevin O'Leary of the Shark Tank all went to Mar-a-Lago, took all the photos, talked about how much fun they had, how proud they are, what delicious meals they had, how much amazing golf they played. And once again, she just came back saying, like, he doesn't seem to want to budge on the tariffs thing, so we're just going to have to keep sending the message that we are very valuable and we'll do whatever he says. It's just pure capitulation. On the other end, you got Justin Trudeau, who in that interview with Jen Psaki was like, well, what do you think about the fact that he's saying that you're going to become the 51st state? He said, do you know what defines a Canadian? That we're not American. And I was like, oof, that's so profoundly sad. Just the complete lack of national identity, which makes sense. I mean, like, it's gone through a handful of revisions, but at this point, like, the idea of like, well, okay, which direction do we go in? Do we go in the conservative direction of being like, okay, we need to kind of just honor John A. Macdonald, the founder of Canada, talk about how we're a proud, independent nation. And then you're like, well, yeah, but that guy was a white supremacist and a hardcore one, like, even for the style at the time. Like, it's not as if it's like, well, yeah, but everyone was kind of, you know, white and racist back then. It's like he talked about the superiority of the Aryan race. He called Chinese people mongrels. He's like the godfather of indigenous genocide here in this country. He's a really bad dude. He was doing forced starvation of indigenous children. And, you know, some people have tried to do historical revisionism of him. It's kind of awkward because how do you both say, well, he's the founder of the country, but he's also a white supremacist genocidal maniac? And yeah, I agree, the two are hard. If you wanted to kind of, I don't know, try and find a new identity, a new idea of what it actually is, you would have to have one that incorporates the idea that we should be doing land back, that we should have proper reconciliation, not performative reconciliation. Like, stuff like that would be a positive direction forward. But instead, liberals are kind of stuck in the, we're proud Canadians because we're not Americans. That's what defines us. It's like, what? If I ask an American, and I don't even have to go to a fucking red, white, and blue bleeding fucking I love my country, they'll have a whole bunch of stories to tell me. I mean, they're myths. They bought into a national myth. That's true. I agree. It's not true. We live in the greatest, freest country of all time. God's green light shines upon our, like, all that kind of shit. But they'll actually have an idea of it, right? A lot of other people can say that about their nations, right? If you go to Vietnam, for example, you will see a people who have such incredible levels of confidence because they destroyed and defeated the American Empire with you know, much less military power, and that has been woven into the very concept of what it means to be a Vietnamese person. They don't call it the Vietnam War over there; they call it the American War, and that's created the sense of national identity. And honestly, while at the same time not being distinctly like antagonistic towards any, like, you know, travelers who happen to be Canadian or American who go there, incredibly friendly, polite, generous people. But there is at least something in terms of like, this is how they define themselves. Can't say the same thing about Canadians. It's like, it's all over the map. And honestly, defining yourself, like, we used to joke that, like, you know, sometimes if you call a person who's from New Zealand an Australian, they get really mad, or if you call an Australian a person who's from New Zealand, they get really mad. But normally it's New Zealanders who get really mad if you call them Aussies, and then you're like, oh, well, what's the difference? And it's like, well, we're not Australian. And it's like, oh, okay, that you defined yourself as not Australian. No, there's more to it than that. There's Kiwis, you know, there's obviously other things, good things, great things, if you will.
Danielle Smith met with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago this weekend, where she says she had a friendly and constructive conversation, highlighted the U.S.-Canadian energy relationship and how hundreds of...
Now, this is the opposite thing. The conservatives, who have spent so long just fucking ingesting, digesting, and like, you know, turning it into compost of this man's boots, are in a weird spot. Like, all of the far right, the True North, you know, the Rebel News, the Daniel Smiths, even the Pierres, and specifically, you know, the PP, they all kind of have to be like, well, what do we do here? Do we get real nationalistic? Do we get antagonistic? Do we say we're proud Canadians and fuck you, Trump? Daniel Smith is going way more into the direction of whatever he wants. No, seriously, whatever he wants. Honestly, we would love to be absolved by you. Like, can you just annex Alberta, take us over? We want to become part of America. We'll give America a really fun pointy hat. It'll be like a top hat, you know? America will just suddenly gain this long strip just right above, like, you know, just a little bit to the west, but still.
Thousands of American jobs are supported by energy exports from Alberta, Premier Smith adding she'll do everything she can to further Alberta's and Canada's interests.
We're going to face tariffs. It's a question of how long, and Daniel Smith's doing an excellent job to make sure that period of time is as short as possible.
Canada's energy exports have become a focus of trade talks.
Well, yeah, and trust me, Trump knows. Trump knows. There's no way, not a single. He's already been the president. He knows. You don't sit down in a room and then he sits there and he's like, so let's do tariffs, and then someone else goes, yeah, but they're going to cut off our energy, and he's like, well, how much energy do we actually get from them? A lot, a lot. Upwards of like 93% of our natural gas. Huge amount of our electricity. I think close to like 60% of our crude oil. Basically the energy. They give us the energy. It's the trade. They give us the energy and we just keep them safe. They don't have to have any kind of super aggressive military. They don't even have nukes. Did you know that? Canada doesn't have nukes, but they don't need nukes because, again, no one's really going to threaten Canada with America right next door being like, no, you don't do that. But in exchange, there was always this kind of, well, we protect you and you give us the energy, the sweet energy. So here they are. Oh, bloody hell, Trump, what do you need? Bucko, I am here to serve. Serve I will. Yeah, gross. Just fucking guzzling Trump's piss. And so that happened over the weekend. How true is it all? Well,
Donald Trump has said over and over again, the U.S. is subsidizing Canada.
We are subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year.
The United States is subsidizing Canada.
As I called him, Governor Trudeau, I said, listen, what would happen if we didn't subsidize you? Because we give them a lot of money. It's very unfair.
But what does Trump mean exactly? Subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year. And is it true? We should start by saying that everyone is partly guessing what Trump means when he talks about the U.S. subsidizing Canada, because he hasn't actually explained where he's getting this $100 billion number from. And the number sometimes changes with a whole bunch of other grievances getting thrown into the pot.
Why are we supporting a country, $200 billion plus a year? Our military is at their disposal. All of these other things, they should be a state.
But let's pick up on what appears, at least most.
The answer is because he can, and people just fucking eat it up. That's why. Just say whatever the fuck he wants. Now, it's the post-truth age. Have you seen what's happening right now? I know this is a complete side story, but Bill Maher, Sam Harris, Milo, and Tim, if you didn't know, I'll give you the TLDR because I'm not going to cover it. Essentially, Sam Harris used to be part of the intellectual dark web. He was one of like the big fucking, the original six or whatever you want to call them. And, he was pretty beloved on the right because of that. He was basically one of their intellectuals who was able to say, yes, I'm an atheist. Yes, I don't believe in God, but I'm fine hanging out with people who do believe in God so we can have conversations. But also, I'm really obsessed with black crime rates, and so that's why you kind of like me, right? I'll talk about 1350. I'll talk about all that other kind of fuck. Oh, I'll also be able to give all of you reason to keep talking about IQ in perpetuity, not just IQ, but IQ and race. I will reignite that. So you like me, Sam Harris, clear, soft-spoken gibberish. And so he was beloved on the right to a certain extent, but he was never like a Republican. He was always, yes, I am a rationalist, I'm a centrist, I'm enlightened, and because of that, I'm going to tell all of you that it sounds like Donald Trump's completely insane. And then they'd be like, whoa, Sam, say it ain't so. Betrayal. And he's like, what do you mean betrayal? I was fine hanging out with all of you. I know you're all Republicans, I know you're all MAGA, I know you're all right-wingers, but I'm not, and I'm going to say that Donald Trump sucks. It's like, no, you can't do that. That's not how the game works. We cast you aside. You are kicked out of the IDW. And so for a while, he's kind of struggled with that because he's obviously, pro-vaccines. They're super anti-vaccine. That's causing a lot of trouble. Big rift. And then he went on Bill Maher the other day. He's on Bill Maher. And Bill Maher, he's talking shit about Jordan Peterson, saying Jordan Peterson's a conspiracy theorist. And then Bill Maher asks him, and he gave Bill Maher a win, which is one of the just worst things a human being can do. But Bill Maher just says, can you name me a single conspiracy theory that Jordan Peterson spreads? And Sam Harris crickets. He was just there. He's like, I'm like, are you serious? Oh my God. I don't even know where I'd start with this one. Hey, just right out of the gates, spreading the idea that there's a cock-milking Chinese communist breeding program. He did that. There's an easy one. You can bring up the tweet. You can show the blurred photos. You can be like, that's not true. That this was actually cock-milking fetish porn for Britain. But he didn't know that. And he just saw these cock-milking machines and thought that this was a Chinese communist breeding program. And then he was just there and he was like, oh my God, oh, lovely day in CCP hell and all that kind of shit. There you go. Conspiracy theory. He spread it. It's not real. The carnivore diet. There's another easy one. Yeah, absolutely. Climate change denial. Light into just actual climate change denial. There's another one. His vilification of trans people and inability to read any of the modern literature on the topic, and is still stuck in like 1965 when it comes to this stuff. Like, oh, well, according to the DSM-2, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, fine. Yes, the guy's nothing but conspiracy theories. But now that one clip is just making its rounds on the right, and they're all just so excited about it. And like, yeah, we told you Sam Harris has no idea what he's talking about. He couldn't name one conspiracy theory, not even one. And of course, all the leopards are feasting, and I'm just sitting there like, delicious. But is that going to change anything? Like, it's giving Milo, of all people, a win right now.
Of the time to be driving this claim about the U.S. subsidizing Canada. And that's the trade imbalance between the two countries.
Donald Trump has always been obsessed with trade balances, trade surplus and deficits, and the fact that the U.S. has a trade deficit.
We're spending hundreds of billions a year to take care of Canada. We lose in trade deficits.
A trade deficit happens when countries...
DSM-2, we were on DSM-5, not 6. We're going into 6. That I was doing an impression of Jordan Peterson, hence the voice. I was impersonating Jordan Peterson and saying that he's out of touch, and that's why he was saying the DSM-2. That was part of the bit. I'm not sure why so many people are like, no, Lance, that's not the current DSM. I was like, that's the point. It wouldn't make sense if I made it accurate.
Country A imports more from country B than it exports. And Trump's right on one central point. The U.S. does have an ongoing trade deficit with Canada. And that's been the case for years. Canada has, in fact, sold more goods to the United States than the U.S. has sold to Canada. And zooming in on 2023, for example, according to the U.S. Census Bureau,
which, by the way, I'm not saying that like Canada also doesn't depend on that. It's like, why do so many countries depend on the United States? Because you're the consumers. You consume. Like a lot of these countries that manufacture stuff, Canada included, whether it be energy, resources, lumber, etc., we need people to buy it. And so right now there's this really weird thing where Trump's like, well, we're going to impose these really high tariffs. And then it's like, well, what's Canada going to do? Because if you do that, it'll be a disaster to both our industries. And Xi Jinping now said that he is now open and opening the door to the possibility to become much stronger trading partners with Canada, which unfortunately, due to the xenophobia that has been pretty pervasive in our media for a long time, a lot of people are like, no, don't do that. Don't switch. Don't start selling vast amounts of energy to China instead of the United States. But I mean, money will talk over nationalism or programmed xenophobic sentiment eventually. If it gets to a point where, Trump is continuing his tariffs, he doesn't care if the energy is cut off, well then, you're obviously going to look for someone else to buy it.
Hard numbers are pretty clear. Canada exported $427 billion worth of goods to the U.S., while the U.S. exported $355 billion worth of goods to Canada. The difference between those two numbers, about 72 billion U.S., or about 100 billion Canadian.
He talks about, I'm a trader, I love trade, I want so much trade, but it has to be fair. But what he means by fair is that if the U.S. has a surplus, it's fair. If the U.S. has a deficit, it's unfair.
So maybe that's where Trump is getting this $100 billion figure from. Except if that's the case, it's misleading. Because what I just showed you was the trade deficit in goods, physical things. But think of all the other things that Americans sell to Canadians.
By the way, facts don't matter. Facts don't matter for a person like Trump. Like, honestly, you can't sit there and be like, oh, Trump, have you seen this YouTube video? It seems like it's done by a pretty neat person. It's called "Is Trump Right About the U.S. Subsidizing Canada?" About that, you can go watch it. It's really easy. It's only 9 minutes. If you put it on 1.5, you could watch it even quicker. You know, you could finish the whole thing. Maybe by the time you finish a coffee, if you drink coffee, I can't remember. Either way, very easy for you to understand this concept and send it to him. He doesn't care. Neither does MAGA. They're not there to learn. They're not there for facts. They want wins. That's it. They want liberal tears, and they want to cuck you. They want you to be in the cuck chair. They want Canada to be emasculated, I guess. They want the emasculation ritual. They want everyone to suddenly just be like, oh, yes, sir, whatever you want. We do produce all the fentanyl. That's not true. Well, just tell him, what does he need? Whatever he wants. And that just gets them so excited, you know? Again, this is why the only person who's responding properly to any of this, Claudia Sheinbaum, just straight up being like, yes, this is factually inaccurate. There are tons of things the United States imports into Mexico, or I should say exports into Mexico, that are dangerous, such as 70% of our illegal firearms come from America. We don't impose trade tariffs based on that. If that's how we operated, there would be tons of reasons why countries would suddenly just cut off trade in exchange for, well, we don't want the illegal things that you aren't authorizing come through the country. It's not as if Mexico is authorizing fentanyl to come into their country, into America. America is smuggling it into America, where Americans consume the fentanyl, and like that's the proper response. Not to entertain the bullshit.
From financial services, telecommunications, air transport, consulting, hell, even Netflix.
It's very important to look at services as well, because services has been a growing part of trade for many decades now.
Yes, any honest accounting of a trade imbalance must take services into account, because that's trade. And when you look at that balance sheet in services, the US actually has a surplus over Canada of about $32 billion US.
You serve us.
Which doesn't wipe out the deficit in goods, but it certainly pulls the two countries a little closer together. The actual total trade imbalance between Canada and the US is about $40 billion US, or 57 billion Canadian in Canada's favor. But let's set aside the number, because like I said at the start, I don't know if it's clear to anyone where Trump is getting his numbers from, because he hasn't explained it, even when asked. But there is a bigger question here about how Trump appears to be framing the trade imbalance as some sort of subsidy to Canada.
So I think what he's saying implicitly, we're giving more dollars to Canada than they're spending in the U.S. And he thinks that's a subsidy.
He's just saying the very fact that there's a trade deficit shows that we must be subsidizing things in some fashion. And that's not the case.
Right, because when we think of subsidies...
Right, because that's not how this works. That's not... You're buying up all of our things? So we're supporting you. It's like a welfare system. No, this is consumption. What?
We tend to think of handouts, right? Except it's not like the US is just sending Canada $40 billion a year for nothing in return. Like when I buy a $6 jar of mayonnaise from Walmart, that's not a subsidy. I'm buying mayonnaise. And
maybe just that clip. That's all you need. Maybe that's enough. We can explain it in Mayo. If we can get like fucking just a little soundbite, 10 seconds, fucking Mayo theory, send it on over so most Americans can be like, oh, wait, what? Yeah, so you know when you go to the store and you buy things, like I don't know what you buy, but if you buy everything from a stalk of celery to a donut, you're not subsidizing the donut. You wouldn't use that word, right? No, I would use purchasing. Well, what did you just say there? That's right. You bought a good. That's how that works. Yeah, and so that's what he's saying. He's saying that's technically, in his own words, subsidizing it.
Americans are simply buying more from Canada than Canadians buy from Americans. And experts we spoke to say that's not...
Which makes sense. There's way more population, over 10 times. There's a lot of consumption. And specifically, I mean, it sounds as if we're making a whole bunch of neat things. Like, y'all just love our syrup. That's not the case. It's more, I mean, a lot of it comes down to energy, right?
Necessarily a bad thing.
There's nothing inherently good or bad about a trade surplus or a deficit. The United States has had a trade deficit pretty much since the end of the Second World War. Why is that? Because they're richer than any other country, so they buy more stuff.
And consider this, the US's $40 billion trade deficit with Canada pales in comparison to its trade deficit with many other countries. Just look at how much more the US buys from China each year, for example. That gap is more than $250 billion.
So Canada only accounts for about 5% of the overall U.S. deficit just in terms of traded goods. It's not even in the top 5 countries that have a larger surplus.
But let's go one level deeper with Trump's argument, because what he's actually been trying to get across is that the U.S. doesn't actually need any of the stuff it's buying from Canada, and that it's only been buying Canadian products to essentially help Canada out. That's the subsidy.
We're doing it because of habit, and we're doing it because we like our neighbors, and we've been good neighbors. But we can't do it forever. You know, they make 20% of our cars. We don't need that. I'd rather make them in Detroit.
And it's not just cars. It's also
lumber. We have massive fields of lumber. We don't need their dairy products. We have more than they have. We don't need anything.
So
cut down the trees, all of the trees. It's the Lorax.
So now we're starting to understand his point, that he believes the U.S. can and should produce all of these things domestically instead of paying Canada for them.
The America First movement, not just Trump, but the America First movement and the economists who are part of it are fixated on the deficit as synonymous with job loss in the U.S.
And that's certainly an argument you can make from industry to industry. If you set aside the notion that the whole reason you buy things instead of make things is because making things is often more expensive. But if Trump really believes...
Wait, so does that mean he's going anti-capitalist? Does that mean all of a sudden he's trying to change it from a consumer society? Are they populists? Is this all populism?
That the U.S. buys too much from Canada. He is leaving one big thing out. The one daily purchase that makes up about a quarter of everything Americans buy from Canadians.
Energy.
The U.S. produces more crude oil than any other country in the world, around 13 million barrels a day. But for its own citizens, it needs more than that, about 20 million barrels a day. And it can't even efficiently use a big chunk of what it does produce, because historically, American refineries have been set up to process a different, heavier kind of oil than American drillers can find in their own shale deposits. So that's an expensive problem. But you know who produces exactly the kind of heavy crude oil America needs? You guessed it. The U.S. buys the majority, around 60% of the crude oil it needs from Canada. And on some level, it makes sense. Canada is a relatively stable energy partner. Pipelines make transporting oil a lot easier.
Because of the distance, because of pre-existing supply chain links, because of transportation routes. This is why Canada and the U.S. trade the most.
And one other way to look at Canada's trade surplus.
If you remove oil, we're now running a trade deficit with the United States.
It's largely one commodity in our case. And that commodity is not putting Americans out of work. It's putting Americans to work.
Putting Americans to work because of what I just mentioned a few moments ago, that there is an entire industry built around the importation of heavy Canadian crude and all the American workers who process and refine that oil domestically.
Oil and gas is probably one of the best examples of how something that is responsible for a huge trade deficit is actually creating tens of thousands of jobs in the U.S.
Now, Trump has signaled that he intends to ramp up domestic drilling, too. But to use all of that oil domestically, there would have to be a significant and expensive retooling of America's refining capacity as well. That doesn't happen overnight. So in the meantime, Americans buy a ton of oil from Canada. And that is the single biggest driver of the trade deficit that Donald Trump says is a big, big problem.
If it were to be interrupted, I know it would harm Canada, but it also would get the attention, I think, of U.S. policymakers because there are parts of and regions of the U.S. that very much depend on those imports.
So, yes, the U.S. has a trade imbalance with Canada. No, that doesn't mean the U.S. is subsidizing Canada's economy. But yes, Trump can and will likely continue to argue that it should be buying less from Canada and producing more at home. How easy that is to actually do is one question. Another is how much of all of this is just part of one long, dramatic negotiation.
And distraction, I want to add. Big distraction. Because, again, Trump is doing this while he's not the president. And while he does it, everyone talks about it globally. I mean, Greenland's talking about how afraid they are about potentially having Americans show up on their shores. Canada's talking about how they don't want to become the 51st state. He's getting Americans and Canadians to suddenly fight each other, both on the social medias and maybe on the fucking, you know, the shores of White Rock. I'm not entirely sure where this is all headed, but it distracts you, right? For stuff like this. Republicans are gearing up for a class war. Democrats warn the GOP pursues huge Medicaid cuts. It won't be any consolidation to struggling Americans that their hardship allows some rich buddies of Donald Trump to buy a bigger yacht. Political analysts and Democratic lawmakers raised the alarm over the weekend at a leaked document indicating that House Republicans intend to pursue massive cuts to Medicaid, a program that provides sometimes life-saving coverage to roughly 80 million people across the United States. Near the top of the list is spending reform options that the House Republicans are considering to help finance additional tax cuts for the rich and large corporations. Are proposals that would strip Medicaid coverage for millions of Americans, including children, seniors, and people with disabilities. One of the changes listed in the leaked documents obtained by Politico last week would convert Medicaid funding structure to a per capita cap, which under federal government would provide states with a fixed amount of funding for each beneficiary rather than paying a percentage of the state's overall Medicaid costs. The document, which reportedly comes from the House Budget Committee, suggests reform would strip $918 billion in cuts over a 10-year period. Edwin Park, a research professor from Georgetown University, McCourt, a public policy center for children and families, noted that such a change would radically restructure Medicaid financing. These funding caps are typically designed to fail to keep pace with expected growth in healthcare costs in order to severely cut federal Medicaid spending, with those cuts growing larger and larger over time. Moreover, the caps would also fail to account for any unexpected growth costs, such as public health emergencies for a new costly drug therapy, which would make federal funding cuts even larger than originally anticipated. All this can be done in the background as long as he just says wild and zany things publicly. He can do it from fucking Mar-a-Lago. All he has to do is be like, I'm going to say something. And everyone's like, oh, what's he going to say? I'm going to take over Mexico. I'm going to rename the Panama Canal, the Trump Canal, blah, blah, blah. And then everyone's like, what? No, you can't. You can't do all those things. What are you talking about? Take over Greenland. Greenland is mine now. Everyone's like, whoa, okay, well, there's the news cycle. And in the background, boom, here's what's going on. Here's the kind of shit they actually want to pull off. By the way, Jank, are you paying attention? Are any of you, all the people here, like, oh, he's actually a populist, and he won't be able to do things like this, the exact thing they're doing, because he's a populist, and MAGA will revolt. They'll be like, oh no, we don't want that. They're so distracted. They're calling the fires in LA lesbian fires. They're saying the DEI equals die. They're worried. Their new target right now, because fascism eventually just comes for everyone that they don't consider to be part of the master race, happens to be people who do sign language. That's what they're all yelling about right now. Like, we really need to get rid of people doing sign language. I got to be honest with you, it's distracting. People at home can use closed captioning. Why do we have sign language? A number of reasons. I mean, that's like saying, why do we have ramps? Like, okay, did you know that those live press conferences are live? Which means there could be people in the audience who appreciate ASL, who could actually understand what they're saying based on the interpreter who's doing that. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't take anything away from you. Are you really that distracted? Christopher Rufo, Charlie Kirk, this seems to be the thing that all of them are making into a really big issue right now. We need to talk about this. We need to get rid of this. We need to eliminate this. It's woke. It's woke for more people to have accessibility. It's woke for more people to understand things. That's woke. That's woke. So that's what they're concerned about. They're not revolting. They're not like, oh, wait, you're going to be gutting Medicaid, just completely destroying it. They're not talking about that because they're not being seen that. They're not being shown that. All they have to do is find whatever weird story is going to come up, and then that's all they run with all day. And then if you try talking to some of them on social media, you'll notice the replies just fill with, why won't you talk about how wokeness has made interpreters use extra strange, exaggerated sign language to distract us from the things the police are saying? Like, wait, what? Where's this coming from? You can't be thinking about this on your own. Oh, Charlie Kirk is saying that. Okay, Christopher Rufo is saying that. Okay, oh, now Tim Pool is saying that. Oh, now Benny Johnson is saying that. What? Benny Johnson has Andrew Tate on. Doesn't he know that guy has admitted to having sex with a 16-year-old? He said he started a relationship with a 15-year-old. He's on camera admitting to rape. Why is he platforming him? I'm distracted. Oh, God, Medicaid's gone. Well, all right. There we have it. I mean, this works so well, this technique, that Mark Zuckerberg is doing it out in the open right now. Just completely for all the eyes of the world to see. All you need to do is dangle some turf keys in front of a whole bunch of right-wingers, and all of a sudden they're like, wait, what? Oh, he will be our new god. Yes, never mind. We're done with Elon Musk. Elon Musk is old news. We're on to Mark Zuckerberg now. Yes, he's the new sexy, super confident, masculine man who wants to get rid of tampons in men's washrooms or something. That's what this is all about, right? That's all we need to talk about. Let's just concentrate on that from now on. Fuck Medicaid. I bet you already drink coffee and love coffee, but you're probably worried if your coffee has blood in it. Not literal blood, but conflict zone blood. Did you want to buy coffee that is not only going to be delicious, it's going to arrive right on your door, it helps a little bit fund the serfs, and also it's end-to-end indigenous owned. That's why I partnered with Solstice Coffee, and hey, if you order by going to serfscoffee.com, they even include a free sticker, which is pretty awesome. So there's really no reason to actually not replace the coffee you already drink with delicious ethical coffee. That's why you should check out serfscoffee.com.
Hey, if you'd like to unlock secret bonus episodes as well as uncensored content, go to patreon.com/The Serfs. This show is produced by Anna Loves Riley, Arian McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Jimmy Sombrero, Voltimondi, Omni, Political Puppy, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demmel, Travis McClinton, Trincel, Words Greenwood, with additional support coming from all of these amazing human beings right here.